do is just begin. And hello, everyone. We're going to get underway. Welcome. Good to be here. And you are tuned into How I Got Here, part of the Bathurst Multicultural Storytelling Festival. And I have three special guests who are going to share stories with us. And I also have people attending on Zoom. And we don't at this stage have Facebook Live going, but we're going to try. So let me begin by making an acknowledgement to country. I would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people, who are the traditional custodians of the land. I'd also like to pay respect to the elders, both past and present, of the Wiradjuri nation, and extend that respect to other Indigenous Australians who are present. So thanks very much for coming. I think you will have seen from the bits of marketing and so on that the background to this storytelling festival. We've had a competition where we encouraged people from Bathurst to share their stories on the theme of how I got here. And we've had various sessions in different parts of Bathurst, such as the Seymour Centre, where we've talked to people about sharing their stories. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to ask anybody who's attending if they want to share, but initially we're going to have some sharing coming from the panel. So can I just tell people how Zoom works? If you put up your hand, we can see that, and putting up your hand means that you want to say something, and then we can unmute you or allow you to talk. So does anybody want to be part of story sharing today, just to give me a sense of who might want to today? Please put up your hand electronically, and otherwise I'll call again later in the afternoon. So I'll kick off by sharing a personal story of my own, and then I'll ask Ingrid, Sally and Thamal Neela to share their stories. So I'm Jock Cheetham, and I'm here to tell you how I got here. The story I'm about to tell you includes an invitation to you all to consider sharing a story on the same theme, how I got here. But you, of course, would be free to interpret this phrase in whichever way you'd like. It began, as it often does, with two people falling in love. We met over a hot keyboard, typing away as sub-editors at the Sydney Morning Herald. Neroli and I progressed through the normal stages, dating for a year, which meant staying most nights at each other's house, until we moved in together, and later a house, which we bought together in Sydney. We shared many pleasures, from cooking and eating out to watching films and TV series on our projector on the wall, like a home cinema, and travel, federal politics, chatting and laughing. We had friends, but we were just as happy with our own company. Neroli left journalism and eventually got a PhD examining multiculturalism in regional schools. Her area of interest was cultural diversity in regional areas. So when I left journalism and got offered a job in Bathurst teaching journalism, one of the great attractions for Neroli was the opportunity to relate regional multiculturalism to this regional area, Bathurst and the Central West. She wanted to develop a Big Sky festival based on ideas from her scholarship. So it was in great anticipation of opportunities that we both moved to Bathurst nearly 3 years ago. Within weeks of moving into our new home, Neroli fell ill. Her bone condition, osteopetrosis, which she had lived with since birth, was worsening. In the past, it had meant many broken bones, femur, ribs, elbow, frequent medical visits, and a problem in her jaw that was resolved with some pretty full-on but ultimately successful surgery. This time, it was not to be so simple. Neroli's osteopetrosis led to increased calcification in her bones, which meant they were dense. Ultimately, the mineralisation obstructed canals in the bones that house blood supply. So red cell blood production was disturbed in her bone marrow, and blood supply to her jaw was cut off. This led to bits of her jawbone dying, which impacted her teeth and ultimately led to infection in the dead bone. Such a problem is painful, protracted, and complex. What solutions existed were tried. Neroli spent months in hospital in the second half of 2017. At the end of that year, after the mineralisation around her optic nerve canal pinched the nerve, she lost her sight right around Christmas. We came back to Bathurst in the new year with few friends here and no support from the medical system or vision support system. That took 2 months to kick in, and tried to adjust to Neroli's life without sight. On our own, except for visit by Neroli's mum and a few friends here such as Wendy, Joe and Tracy. Her jaw condition did not respond to the painful treatments. The surgeons advised they had to remove the dead piece of jaw. Neroli lost her sense of smell and taste, which was a terrible blow to her quality of life. We waited and found some happiness in these tough times. In the middle of 2018, Neroli had the piece of jaw taken out, and after the operation fell into an intensive care unit, ICU delirium for 10 days. We were overjoyed when she returned to us, started to walk again and even play the hospital piano with quite some skill. Throughout all that year's ordeal, Neroli did not complain once or express any sorrow for herself. Once again, we returned to Bathurst and started again with some hope, Neroli on soft foods for the time being. A couple of weeks later, after collapsing in the middle of the night on the way to the bathroom, walking problems ensued. We were back in hospital again, this time in the neurology department. We never really did get to the bottom of what happened. Despite 3 MRI scans, each of which we waited a week for, despite 4 months in hospital, most of which I spent living with Neroli in her room, rehab that didn't work, an acute infection, we still only know it was some kind of autoimmune reaction in Neroli's brain as a result of some infection that arose. We knew not how. And we don't really know why Neroli passed away at Prince of Wales Hospital, Randwick, in the early hours of Saturday, November 24, 2018, except that she must have been exhausted. She hadn't walked unassisted since being admitted. And Neroli hadn't really moved properly, fed herself, written, scratched, turned over in bed for 3 months. I don't tell you this for sympathy for Neroli or for me. We all know stories of people dying, and many people have no doubt lost someone close to them or intimate to them who are listening today. Neroli lived a life full of joy, gratitude, and kindness. This time I returned to Bathurst without Neroli. My friends were in Sydney and travelling abroad. My work colleagues didn't know what to do, I don't think, so they did very little, with 1 or 2 exceptions. I faced this alone, and even as I prepared to work on Neroli's legacy in the way the 2 of us discussed, I felt a sense of pointlessness. I was falling fast into despair. I can't say how serious any of my negative thoughts were, but I was starting to think about means and methods. I knew I had a decision to make. I had a choice between life and death. When I met Meow, and in the process of getting to know her, I chose life. I launched that Bathurst Multicultural Storytelling Festival in late March last year, fulfilling one of Neroli's ambitions. I was alive to run around Bathurst, listening to ABC Radio National podcasts as ever, one of which told me how men can't talk, can't share, suffer alone, and too often take their own lives, as we know. So today I'm sharing, I'm opening up in the hope others will open up. I'm inviting everyone to reach out to people in pain, to people who are grieving, and make the first moves. Because know this, as hard as it is to reach out to someone who is suffering, it is much harder for that suffering person to reach out to you. Mental health issues or trauma or deep pain are destabilizing and have a kind of freezing effect. Reach out. And so, please share your own stories. How I Got Here is part of the Bathurst Multicultural Storytelling Festival this year, and today, March 21, is Harmony Day, and it's also the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. We will run the storytelling competitions again to give something for people to do while they're locked up at home. This phrase can mean anything you want. How I lost 50 kilograms, how I gained 50 kilograms, how I got to Bathurst, how I got to Australia, a migrant story, an intellectual journey, a spiritual journey. So that's how I got here, starting this festival, developing this theme, sharing this story, by choosing life and choosing to share and connect. Thank you. So that's my contribution. Thanks for listening. I've got 3 panelists here who are 3 storytellers who've shared their stories via the competition, and these are the finalists, and I'm proud to have them join us. And Ingrid is going to kick off. Ingrid actually had a part in developing the theme, because among our discussions, it just sort of arose organically as an idea. I can't even remember exactly how it was, but I know Ingrid was thinking about issues around how I got here, and I was thinking of that phrase. And in one of our conversations, the idea of having that as a theme for this year's festival arose. So I thank you for those conversations and that sharing, Ingrid, and I invite you now to share your own story that you've written, and I look forward to hearing that.
Thank you very much, Jock. I had no idea that when I spoke about how I got here was of such interest to you. So here is my story about how I got here. The Wiradjuri First Nation people introduced themselves by citing clan and country by descriptive and emotive language. So here I am in Bathurst in central New South Wales to share with you my connection to country, or rather many countries. I was named Kang Chai Ing by birthright, daughter of Kang Ho Bi and Tan Sian Nyo. My father, Ho Bi, called Sumeneb home, his country the capital of the island of Madura in Indonesia. My mother, Sian Nyo, came from East Java, born in the small town of Kediri. Both were descended from Chinese migrants who settled in Indonesia, fleeing from the troubles that had beset their homeland. One from Fukien, the other from Shandong. My father's clan were agriculturalists, growing tobacco and crops. This was obviously the gene pool that my father inherited, managing a coffee plantation and making charcoal during the Japanese occupation in the Second World War. He continued his love of nurturing plants, and especially roses, which he grew wherever he lived, growing especially fragrant specimens for cut flowers that filled up my parents' home with the sensuous fragrance. My mother's clan were traders, involved in general stores that sold homewares, fuel, and food to the native population. My grandfather was involved with sugarcane trade and mills, and during the Japanese occupation, managing rice mills for his clan. Because of his trade with the Dutch, he believed that a Western education would benefit his children. And so my mother studied to become a primary school teacher, furthering her education by correspondence to gain her secondary school teaching qualifications for maths and physics. As a teacher, she taught and ran a boarding house for children from remote locations. It was here that she met my father, who was 9 years her junior. They married in 1944. Fate decreed that within 2 years after Indonesian declaration of independence from the Dutch colonial government, in 1947, My parents fled the lawlessness and insecurity of insurgency in East Java for the safety of a big city. With their firstborn son, they found themselves settling in Batavia, now known as Jakarta. I was born in the year of the final independence from Dutch colonialism in 1949. The big metropolis of Jakarta, of fine colonial buildings and grand tree-lined avenues, formed my country, but it didn't last. By the time I was in my teenage years, persecution of people of Chinese descent became obvious. University entry quotas for Chinese students was reduced to 10% of student intake, meaning opportunities for a tertiary education for my brother and myself were limited. A former Dutch colleague of my mother's and his family, who knew our family well during shared housing arrangements in Jakarta, had moved to Australia when the Indonesian government rid itself of its Dutch colonial masters and public services in early to mid-1950s. The kind offer from Jan and Gerda Nielsen to help educate my brother and I in Sydney was gladly and gratefully accepted by my parents. As for my father was working for French airline Transport Aérien Intercontinental, he took us on a short holiday to Sydney to meet the Nielsen family in 1960. At the time, the white Australian policy was in full swing. But a kind immigration official suggested to Jan Nielsen and my parents that adoption would enable my brother and I to stay in Sydney to continue our studies. And so my brother adopted a new identity of John Nielsen in 1960, followed by my new identity as Ingrid Nielsen in 1964. I was a mere 15-year-old. Sydney became my second country, where I felt safe and belonged. I completed my secondary education at a Catholic high school for girls and earned a Commonwealth scholarship to study for a degree in architecture at the University of New South Wales. Sydney offered me many opportunities to create a successful career as an architect. When I left my position as senior design architect at Western Sydney University in 2014, my husband Sturt and I began searching for a suitable place for our retirement. We chose Bathurst over at least half a dozen locations after an exhaustive desk and field research, with weighting to suit each of our individual criteria. For Sturt, whose peers and family has strong links to the central west of New South Wales for over 160 years, including finding one of his forebears' name on a plaque in the Bathurst War Memorial Carillon, it was a homecoming. For me, Bathurst feels full of promise, welcoming and friendly, a place I can call my third country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. I enjoyed hearing that, even more than I enjoyed reading it. So it's an interesting thing, isn't it, that storytelling face-to-face, not as face-to-face as we had planned, can be so engaging. I really appreciate you sharing. So Sally Rummery is going to speak next and share her story. Sally, thanks for joining us, and tell us about your life.
I will. Do you mind if I just read it directly? Is that okay?
Of course.
Okay. How I got here. Dripping, undies balled in our hands, we skid past the group, still drinking. Wet hair clings to brown shoulders as we pile onto a bed. A puddle of arms and legs, we giggle as we whisper goodbyes. Outside, the group sing and cheer. The night is hot, and I wake to find Molly asleep on the floor. New sun spills itself across streets, lined with plane trees as I leave Argentina for Chile, and eventually Australia. My bus heaves itself up and then over the pale redness of the Andes, and I see myself on the slight curved line that is the division between sea and sky. Santiago is on fire. Its buildings grown ugly with spray-painted protests. A raw swollen throat and accompanying fever mirrors the angry city. Looking for a post office, I find a boarded up shop front and a man who tells me to get in his car. Stepping out, his eyes are hard. He comes at me fast, one hand outstretched, the other hitches his pants higher on his hips. Desperate bravery remembers the Spanish words that I spit at him as postcards to a family I've never met suffer my fear. The city's sirens overwhelm our intimacy and I slip away. 2 months before, in the same city, dogs bark and children laugh over the sounds of bartering. The smell of sawdust mixes with the sweetness of mangoes and bright bowls of powdered herbs intersperse neat stacks of vegetables. La rubia, the vendors call. La rubia, ven aquí. A German girl turns to me. Do you understand? No. You are the blonde, she says. They are telling you to come. Later, when I leave Chile for Argentina, this time my bus winding over the northern snow-capped Andes, I become Celestial Azul, the blue-eyed girl. Though sometimes frightened, I do not fall to the power of another, nor do I collapse into the gaping hole that widens beneath my ribcage. I do not become victim to the vision of a cooling, stiffening body, foam spewed from its lips and nostrils. Instead, rain falls past sizzling meat. The umbrella I hold caves inward, drenching me. Laughing, he calls me salt. He tells me he's in love with her. Running, screaming, girls plunge into an icy lake. Snow-capped mountains rise behind us. Instead, I see his face through smoke, marijuana's sweet smell mixing with meat and wine. Sitting with backs to the wind, yellow grass whispers and bends. Mountains, coloured in bold stripes, see his face become a smile. We talk of trauma and the loss and waste of first loves, and she tells me about divorce and of the death of another woman's baby. Across the table, they talk about potatoes. Instead, shoulders warm in the sun, we lean together, heads meeting over my notebook. He writes childishly, numbers appearing. Write them in Spanish, he says, before I get back. His eyes catch the light. I watch a sax player smile through his solos as I drink blueberry beer with a beautiful man who doesn't speak my language. Afterward, holding hands, we run down tiny cobbled streets. I'm alone in a park when I discover I'm happy. A woman pours Smarties into my questioning hands as her small dog licks my knee. Paz, she says. The confectionery's muted green and yellow and pink shells reflecting the garden around us. It is easy to be content in the hubris of strangers. They do not see desperate fear in eyes that open on mornings, inflamed lines stretching along thighs. They do not know the blood underneath my fingernails. In the south, icy wind carves me into pieces. I'm lonely. I share cake with a tiny finch and walk among flamingos. The pink necks form silhouettes against bleak green reeds. Ocean becomes grey as bitter gusts tear shreds in stillness. Peace, she'd said, her cause of kindness lost in the space between our languages. Peace, I said when I saw gratification reflected in the mirror of a pink bathroom, a hand reaching forward, cold, as it held its glass echo. Peace as all of the wild sorrow melts in a fevered throat. That's it.
Thank you very much, Sally. I just wondered if we've got an Indonesian theme going. What's that statue behind you on the wall?
Oh, it is from Indonesia, actually.
Yeah, I recognised it. And Ingrid's story of coming from Indonesia, and I'm wearing a batik shirt from the hometown of the president of Indonesia, Solo or Surakarta. And yeah, what a coincidence.
Yeah.
Thanks very much again for sharing that. We're on Facebook,
Thank you.
perhaps by now, and so I welcome the audience to Bathurst Multicultural Storytelling Festival on Facebook Live, joining us here broadcasting through Zoom. And we're at the How I Got Here storytelling event, and we've heard a couple of great stories already, and Thamil Neela is going to talk next. What I'd like to do before we talk to Thamil Neela, just give us a second there, Thamil Neela, is to see who's there in the audience. We've got a number of participants. Did anybody want to say hello? You can put up your hand and using your Zoom tool, and you could say where you're from and what your name is just briefly if you'd like to, if anyone wants to. If not, that's fine. Go ahead, Brian.
Oh, you know I'm here. Yeah, Brian and Ellie from the Bathurst Refugee Support Group.
Oh, great. Thanks for saying hi. Bathurst Refugee Support Group.
Yeah, great stories, Jock.
Thank you, Brian and Ellie, for tuning in. And Meow, you wanted to say hi?
Hello, everyone. This is Meow. I'm in Bathurst, but I have the Chinese background. I liked the story that everyone is sharing. Looking forward to hear the next one. Thanks.
Thank you. There's no other hands up at the moment. Katerina, please go ahead.
Katerina, I'm based in Sydney at the moment, but I've got a connection to Bathurst. So I only heard about this festival this week through someone that I'm working with at the moment. And but I spent 3 years of my life in Bathurst studying journalism there. So yeah, it's really lovely to be brought back in this way. So thank you to everyone that's sharing today.
Oh, that's great. Great to hear about that connection, and thanks for joining us. And isn't that the great thing about technology? It opens up the world to us, even though the world's not that accessible to us at the moment. Anyone else? Well, that's all for now. I'll check back in a bit later, perhaps. So, Thamal Neela, we're about to flick over to you. Thanks very much for writing and sharing your story. And please tell us what you'd like to share.
So this is a story about how I came here, and so I'll start now. So my name is Thamal Neela, and I'm 12 years old, and I'm from Sri Lanka. Oops, sorry. And this is a short story about how I came here. I was born in a village named Kilinachi in Sri Lanka. When I was born, Sri Lanka was struggling with a civil war where the minorities called Tamil were fighting to live with their rights, so against the government. As a kid, I was born and brought up in the war zone. I did not have a peaceful and joyful childhood. My mother often told me how we struggled in Sri Lanka. Since the time I was born, my mother kept me in an underground bunker to protect me from bombs, gunshots, and shells. The war ended brutally in 2009. We were taken to detention camp for screening and were detained until 2010. In detention camp, in detention camp, there was a threat for my father, so he fled. Therefore, he fled from detention camp and avoided being executed. He went to India. He lived there as an anonymous for more than 2 years. My mother and myself and my grandparents were held back in Sri Lanka in the detention camp until 2010. After we got released from the detention camp, my mother moved with my grandparents to Jaffna, which is their hometown. After that time, my mother constantly got harassed, asking about where my father was, and therefore by the time in 2012, my mother realized that the harassment was getting worse. Therefore, she decided to flee from Sri Lanka and rejoin with my father in India. So my mother took me and flew to India in mid-2012. However, we couldn't live there for as long as we were non-residents of India. Therefore, my parents decided to go to Australia, so we took a boat to Australia. At the time, I was 4. I could not remember much about the journey, but my mother told me my mother told me the boat journey was 18 days and it was very difficult with the limited food and supplies. After 18 days on the boat, we arrived at Christmas Island. A couple of days later, we heard the news that my grandfather passed away. But we couldn't go back to Sri Lanka for his funeral. My father said he had another difficult time because of this. We stayed in Christmas Island for 5 months at a camp. From there, we were sent to Darwin. And we stayed in Darwin for 1 month, and from Darwin we stayed there for 1 month, and then we were sent to Sydney. We stayed for 1 month in Sydney, then we moved to Orange. At that time I was 5. Our life became peaceful in Orange. I went to kindergarten at Clare Public School. Since I was from a different background and culture, I remember it was quite difficult for me to mingle with others. At school, I met new friends and teachers. Some of my friends were Maddie and Claudia, and my favorite teachers were Mrs. Keed, Miss Sinclair, and Mrs. White. It was difficult each year with my study, but my best year would be year 4 and year 5. I made a best friend named Katie in year 4, but later she left the school. I loved Claire very much. It was unforgettable with so much memories. In 2014, I had a baby brother. It was really exciting to see him. I had so much fun with him. Orange was a good place. Also, I learned the countryside is much more safer, the air is cleaner, and the people are much more polite than the city. Hence, I loved Orange. Also, we went camping nearly every year. While I was in year 5, my father got a job in Bathurst, and he drove from Orange to Bathurst every day. Soon my dad and mum decided to move to Bathurst during the October school holidays. It was really sad for me to move as I grew up in Orange and made many friends there. But my parents had no other choice. After the school holidays, I joined year 5 at Bathurst Public School. It was hard for me because I didn't know anyone, but slowly I made friends, and I am now studying year 7 and at Denison College High School campus, and I am coping well with everyone. From here, I am building my future with the support of my parents, teachers, friends, and the local community. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much indeed, Thamal Neela. That was a good story, a powerful story about you and your family's journey from Sri Lanka to Australia. Thanks so much for sharing it. 18 days on the sea in what I assume was a perilous journey, and probably not a ocean-going sea liner with catering, must have been an extraordinary journey and such a potentially terrifying, but also just like immense experience. So I just wonder whether there's another connection here. We have Sally as a journalism student. We have Katerina as a former CSU journalism student. Me as a journalism lecturer. Thamal Neela, don't ignore the field of journalism in the future as a possible career, but plenty of time to think about that. So I'll go back to the people who are listening in on Zoom now. Monica, you have your hand up. Would you like to introduce yourself and say hello?
Unmute. No, unmute.
Yeah, do you want to talk?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
I'd like to thank you for doing this, because I think in the next few weeks we're going to find ourselves very isolated, all of us. And I think we need to connect with each other. Your storytelling will bring us together. It'll give everybody something to do when they're home, because they have to write their stories. So congratulations, Jock. We need Facebook. We need people like you to bring us together as a community. So thank you very much and congratulations.
Well, thank you very much for that, Monica. I appreciate it. Of course, Monica, in her private capacity as a citizen, has actually started a Facebook group called Bathurst at Home, and a whole program that's related to what people can do when they're isolated. And last night we talked about how we can support, at another event, how we can support people who are home and can't get out, to meet both their social and their logistical and food needs. So this is an ongoing conversation, I agree. And I think using this technology is a great start, because as more of us get to know it, we can share it.
I think we're going to have stir crazy children. And so
I think so.
Pom-poms.
We'll need more storytelling competition for them. What else do you think we'll need?
Craft things. They can learn to cook bread. They can make pom-poms. I think this is the new thing. We can make pom-poms.
Yeah, right. And we can get out and wave them around from a safe distance.
Yes, pom-poms.
Great. Thanks, Monica. Well, put up your hands if you wanted to jump in and make a comment or ask questions, perhaps, of any of the storytellers. In the meantime, I'll announce the prizes, because we've heard from the finalists, and I'll read you some comments from the judges. We had a panel of 3 judges, and then it was also overseen by me, but I wanted to make sure that I had some very informed and expert people doing that, and we did manage to get that group of very expert writers to look at everyone's work. And they did mention, as a sort of overview, that it was a tough decision, that everyone on the long list that was up on the website, that is up there now, has written a great story. And so I'll read a few of those comments in a minute. I've got a hand up from Lorraine. Hello, Lorraine. Would you like to say hello to everyone? And
she's muted on her side.
You're muted on your side, Lorraine. So if you find the unmute button, maybe put your hand up again. So if you have a look for the unmute button there. Oh, okay. How's that?
Oh, yeah, sure, she's up.
Okay, you're live, Lorraine.
Hello, my name's Lorraine, and I'm Neroli's mother. And I feel quite emotional sitting here and seeing and hearing Neroli's dream and vision coming to pass. And I just thank Jock and his team for all they're doing to keep Neroli's vision alive. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lorraine. Thanks for saying hi, and thanks for tuning in. It's great to keep in touch, as we do all the time. It's the bedrock of my life. Lorraine, you mentioned the team, so why don't I mention Kevin, who's here. Here he is. Kevin's here. Without him, we couldn't do this technically, because I'm not up to it. Maybe I will be in a few weeks, but Kevin made it happen. Thanks, Kevin. And the judges were Tracy, Kay, and Andrew, who've also been very supportive of me over the years. And Meow has also been a great support to the festival. Jackie, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, hi, it's Jackie and Coyote here from Sydney. And I'd like to say thanks for organising this event too. We're hoping to do some events in Sydney. We did have one planned for yesterday, and we've rescheduled it till the 8th of April. So it may end up being a virtual event as well. also for Harmony Day, it's the multicultural theme. Where ours is going to be with the focus about the river stories. So that's because we live here on the Cooks River and the Woolai Valley and Woolai Creek area. So we're trying to get people together and talking, telling stories or poetry about the river from either our river here or a river from wherever they've come from. So it may end up being a virtual event as well. And thanks for helping teach us this technology as well.
Great, great. Oh, thanks for saying hi, Jackie, and hi, Coyote. Hey. So in response to our stories today, I have these judges' comments from the panel that I mentioned before. So one judge wrote of Sally's work that this story carries evocative memories of youth and dislocation with some simple but powerful writing. Another judge said, Sally's fast-paced style and highly original description, flashing from image to image, observes people and nature with fresh eyes. The reader's visual imagination is not allowed to rest. Highly original, searing combinations of words. And that judge also said that Ingrid's warm and calm writing voice movingly understates the huge upheavals and decisions forced on her family to find safety and a future for the younger members, poignant and uplifting without trying to be. And then that judge continues, Thamil Neela's exquisite use of simple, non-judging language and steady unfolding detail only serve to heighten the complexity and enormity of her tale. She does not dwell on the hardship, separations and brave decisions needed by her family to find a home in Bathurst, yet she and her family's courage and optimism shine through regardless. Another judge wrote of all the pieces submitted that they show great storytelling ability and technical skill. A couple were highly emotive and evocative, and a couple traced their lineage back through the generations, creating fascinating lines through history and geography to tell the story of how they got here. The pieces were very different, so it was very difficult to make a decision on a winner, this judge said. However, I was immediately struck by the simplicity and immediacy of 12-year-old Thamil Neela's story. Her prose is unadorned, telling the facts of her life simply, born in a war zone, protected in an underground bunker, joining the throng of refugees via a 5-month stint on Christmas Island, before finally making her way to contented primary and high school experiences in the relative safety and security of Orange and Bathurst. Her story, simply told, reaches out to the wider world and brings it all the way back to one schoolgirl at her desk at a local school. Well done, Thamil Neela. So Thamil Neela, your story won the competition, and Ingrid and Sally, your equal second. So the prizes will be coming out to you in the post, the check's in the post. But most of all, thank you so much for sharing. That's the point of it all. It's great to have a little bonus to, to be able to share with everyone anyway. But it's about the story, of course, about the storytelling. Does anyone from the attendees who are on Zoom want to make a comment or maybe ask a question of any of the storytellers or share an observation? And pending that, somebody might want to share a story. Don't feel obliged, but feel welcome. I did say to please come to just listen, so that's no problem at all. So in the absence of any other people sharing stories, could I throw to the panelists, maybe starting with Ingrid, to ask you if you have any responses to either each other's stories or to the experience of sharing your story, and of storytelling in general.
Well, I was very taken with Thamil Neela's story. I think she told it very well, and it was quite evident that she was part of an upheaval in her family that fled war zones and even journeys on perilous you know, and perilous journeys on the sea with rickety boats and not much food. And I thought that came through very, very well. And I look forward to seeing her develop into a very good storyteller as she goes and does the secondary school and moves on to tertiary education. So well done, Nila. I really enjoyed your story. And Sally's, I just thought it was very fast moving, and the short sentences, of course, which sort of keeps a heartbeat going and following on. So I really enjoyed your story as well.
Thank you very much for that, Ingrid, and yeah, great to have you. Sally, do you would you like to share any thoughts?
I love Thamanila's. That was so lovely. I think how simply it was written was really incredible. And Ingrid, yours as well. I love it. Was so calm, and I felt like I was there with you. It was really, really lovely.
Thank you, Sally. Thamaniela, did you want to say anything? And after you do, or if you do, I have a question from someone watching on Facebook Live as well. No? Well, this is the question. How is Thamaniela enjoying life in Bathurst now? Does she find it hard to move again after such a dislocation?
Well, it's pretty fun because like I met new friends and I got used to high school, and year 7 is going really well right now. So I'm enjoying it.
That's great. That's good to hear. Any other questions before I wrap up this afternoon's event?
Oh, we've got 2 more.
Yep, we've got some hands up. Annette.
Just gonna unmute her own.
I think you might need to unmute at your end, Annette.
Oh, she's on.
Yep, you're on.
Hello.
Yes, you can hear
I'm
you.
Annette from Kiama. I would like to thank you for allowing us to share this wonderful occasion on social media. This is a first for me, as I am in social isolation myself, and it is wonderful to be able to share the experiences of these very brave people. Each of the stories shows amazing courage in many different ways, but I feel privileged to have heard these stories, and maybe it will make us all in the coming days a little bit braver with the lives that we have to face now. Thank you for sharing. Goodbye.
Thanks, Annette. Thanks for saying hello. I think Ingrid would like to perhaps respond or to say something.
Well, the reason why I put my hand up was to say to Lorraine Colvin what a brave daughter she had, and how wonderful it is to be participating in something that Neroli would have loved. So thank you, Jock, for organizing it all. That's all I wanted to say. Love to Lorraine and Barry. Thank you, Ingrid. There's a quite coincidental connection there through church in Sydney. It's a small world. So I've got some hands up online. Hello, Meow.
Andrew.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. This is Meow again. I would like to first of all congratulate all the finalists in winning the prize. I know winning the prize is not the purpose, but for sharing your stories and how to turn your personal stories into a piece of artwork. I certainly learning a lot, and that makes me to reflect on my own story and where it will go. And second of all, I would like to thank Jock for hosting the event. I admired your putting the effort into this event, and and then transform it into an online mode from face-to-face in this critical situation, not giving up on the event, but still find a way out. That just what Monica said earlier on motivated me to think, where do we go with the event? Currently, it is once a year where we get together in roughly around March. And I know that March is Neroli's birthday month. I'm just inspired by what Monica was mentioning earlier on, that if we're coming into this isolation stage, I wonder whether we can form an online group where we can, for example, a play reading or essay reading, like a reading club, book reading club. Just my idea to extend the festival rather than we gather once a year. And I think this will be the good use of our time when we are in isolation. Just my thoughts. But I would really love to contribute more, and thank Jock, thank everyone for participating, and make it really a community connective event. Thanks.
Oh, thanks so much, Meow. I think that's a great idea. I think we could do that through the festival, any other groups that might want to do that, and through as well Monica's Bathurst at Home group. Another group that might be interested in being involved is the Very Open Mic Night, which runs once a month from the Victoria Hotel, or that's the venue that they have been in. And Kevin and I have been talking about how Zoom has got real potential for performance. So the open mic night has had storytelling, it's had poetry, it's had a lot of music of a range of kinds. And so I think there's real potential for that to be an expression of community, artistic and creative endeavor. And I think behind your idea, Meow and Monica, the idea of doing things at home is this I'm going to say notion. I feel like I'm on Radio National. It's a real trap. But this idea that we could sit and consume globalized, mainly American culture through Netflix for the next 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months, or we can create our own stuff. We can talk to each other. We don't, it doesn't have to always be conversation like you suggest, Mia, but us reading artistic works is a great idea, because we're doing the doing, and then we can experience that at a kind of a more engaged level than the consuming of movies. Or, I'm not saying don't watch movies. I'm just saying, doing things is great. So I've got a hand up from Andrew.
Oh, hi everyone.
G'day.
It's been very interesting listening in to the conversation, and I think the idea of a online readers group is a fantastic idea, and something that Neroli would have really endorsed wholeheartedly. I've been thinking about, as sort of with some apprehension, looking forward to some potential period of isolation, thinking about 1918 and the resources that we have at hand to guide us and support us in this period of isolation compared to 1918. It's a pretty incredible change, yet ultimately faced by the same issue. So would love to be involved. And the other thing I wanted to reflect on was about cultural journeys and how they are written in our lives as we live them, when we don't actually know quite what the story is. thinking, as I heard Annette talking, and the last time I saw her at wedding of Jock and Meow, not long ago, none of us could have foreseen the way this event was going to shape our lives. And now it will become like a key part of your, personal story as you, sort of begin married life.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's something that will profoundly affect us all, and as a lot of people start to lose people that they love as well, and have already, of course, this year, that sort of that sorrow and that grief will also be a part of our lives as well. And it's interesting that we seem to have moved from a economic focus a week or two ago from the national response to a just save as many lives as possible. And I think I was reflecting today that that the impact on the economy is a sacrifice in the sense that everybody is making, not equally, unfortunately, casual workers the most so, but it's an impact on people's lives and livelihoods that is being done particularly for the people who are most vulnerable to this virus. So we're all vulnerable, and potentially, even if we're sort of young or middle-aged and healthy, thankfully less so children, it would seem. But this response is particularly, I think, on behalf of those who are quite old or vulnerable in an immune sense. And so I hope it works, obviously. So thanks, Andrew. Any further thoughts?
No, just looking forward. Well, we should have a competition for our first book.
Oh, sorry, who's our first book?
Oh, if we're going to have a book club, we should be, what are we going to read?
Oh, like a vote or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's a good idea. So we could do both. We could have a book club where we kind of discuss it, and we discuss it on Zoom, and we could have a reading like Meow suggested. Annette, do you, thanks, Andrew. That's a good idea. Do you have a question or a comment, Annette?
Yes, please. It's Annette again. I enjoyed thoroughly listening to everybody speak today, and I wondered if it was at all possible for the other people who had entered the competition for their stories to be published, or us to be to have them known to us, because I'm sure that there are many interesting stories there.
You're right. There are interesting stories, and what I'll do is I'll move them from the competition page where they're sort of anonymised, so that there was no kind of voting on people's names or whatever, and I will give people their credit for their stories. So they're currently, all of the long listed stories are on bathurststorytelling.com. But I'll update that in the next day or two to make it just a bit more readable and with people's names. And we also have plans, and we've applied for funding for a How I Got Here series of media initiatives, ranging from print, where we could share stories in a magazine format for Bathurst, to online, where we can obviously do anything from video to audio to text and photos, and also radio. So 2MCE is interested in that idea. And part of that is reaching out to diverse communities, or all communities really, in Bathurst, to make sure that multiculturalism and diversity is a part of the programming at 2MCE. Monica, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I did. I just would like to know how many people are on today. Are there 10, 20 or 50?
There's 10 plus the panelists, and then there's at present 7 on Facebook Live. Facebook Live seems to go up and down depending on how much movement there is on the screen and whether people are screaming or taking off bits of clothes. So I think that's the total audience at the moment.
But that's excellent, and that's a really, really good start. So yes, we can certainly move on from there.
Yeah, I agree. And it's very, very late marketing of it because we had to get the technology going and so on. But yeah, so thanks everyone for coming. I suspect we might be, we might have got a few more listeners on Facebook Live because I jumped around a little bit. I suspect we might be ready to wrap up unless there's any final comments.
No, nothing on Facebook.
Nothing on Facebook. And
Monica was saying.
Monica?
Oh yeah, she's break down.
No? Okay. That's an old hand. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up. Thanks for everyone for attending. Thank you, Kevin, for the technical support. Much appreciated. I'm betting that Zoom is having problems with Facebook Live around the place. So we got it there in the end, though. Thank you, Ingrid. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Thamalnila, for sharing your stories, and thank you to the other people who shared their stories in the competition. And I look forward to doing a bit more of it. There will be another competition just to sort of generate a bit more interest in this space coming up sooner than expected because of this current situation. Thanks to everybody for attending. And I think maybe we should leave it at that and go and lock ourselves in our rooms. No, not really. It's great to see everybody on video. So I'll sign off, and it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from him.
Bye. And everyone's unmuted.
Thank you very much, Jock.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Thank you all. Okay, I'll see you later. Bye.
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 Ooh.